Okay, next up is talk from Grafana. The plan for the talk is that it takes roughly 20 minutes, so that we have 10 minutes for extended Q&A session after that. So please, if the talk is over, if you could please stay seated and remain quiet, because otherwise nobody would understand the questions and the answers. So, welcome, talker.
Thank you. I hope to talk a little bit about Grafana, specifically the upcoming version of Grafana, and if I have time, show some tips and tricks in the demo as well. But leave some time for questions, because there's usually a ton of questions when I do these talks. My name is Torkel Ödegård. I'm the co-founder at Grafana Labs, the company behind the project and supporting the project, and also trying to build services and products around Grafana. Grafana is an open source monitoring and data visualization tool licensed under Apache 2.0, of course found on GitHub. Looks something like this. You build, or maybe with the light theme or the enterprise theme. People are scared of dark UIs. I actually might use this in a demo because it looks better in this room because of all of the lights. You build beautiful dashboards or graphs and other panels. The graph is kind of the cornerstone of Grafana, the powerhouse panel. Just want to get a show of hands in here and grab a photo. Who in here actually, at some point, have used Grafana? Can you raise your hand? Okay. That's good to know. Kind of what I was hoping for as well. Anyway, you might not know some of this. I'm just going to have a few slides on some of the history and the growth of the project. This is started as a hobby project of mine 4 years ago now. Almost 4 years and a week or so since the first release. And at the time, I was really in love with graphite and time series, application metrics, StatsD, and the like. And I was really feeling that the dashboarding solution for those tools were lacking. And I was also really enjoying using Grafana, which had kind of a really nice solution for dashboarding for logs. So I took inspiration from that and started working on Grafana. And initially, we also supported graphite. But over time, we added support for other data sources like FOSDEM, OpenGSDB, Prometheus, which has become hugely popular lately, and Elasticsearch. And lately, we also added support for MySQL and Postgres, so now you can query your SQL data directly from Grafana. We also have beyond these are the core data sources that are bounded. Oh, I actually forgot CloudWatch is also a core data source, but it's commercial SaaS. Anyway, we not suitable for this conference. Anyway, we also have a ton of data sources on Grafana.com, plugins and panels, apps, and a community-powered repository of ready-made dashboards. As I said, this project has now existed for 4 years, and during that time we've kind of seen a really incredible amount of growth. Starting from version 2, we added some very basic server reporting, so we can see what versions are running. So the last 3 years we've kind of seen how many Grafana servers are actually running, not just track downloads, but actually see how many are actually using the software. And of course, the real numbers. So right now we're at 130,000 reporting servers, but of course it's a lot more Grafana installations running because a lot of people turn off the usage reporting. But it's interesting to see how this trend has progressed in the last 4 years, and it's kind of that the trend is also increasing in velocity and kind of exponential growth. And part of that is, of course, that Grafana is amazing, and it solves this kind of niche domain where there's not a lot of competitors. But I also think that the need for observability and good monitoring tool has also increased with the advent of more elastic infrastructure and microservices and more complex application production environments. The need for good observability tools and and monitoring tools has also increased. So Grafana is kind of riding that wave as well. Beyond just sort of pure installation, we're also seeing a tremendous growth in the open source project in terms of sort of interest from outside contributors and other companies as well. And we're also growing the core team. Just in the last couple of months, we've grown more than double the team from 3 people to 7 people. We also last year launched a community site to help sort of users and developers sort of be successful with Grafana. And it's actually a lot of work to support this community site, but we support so many data sources, and most of the questions are related to a particular data source, how you query this and how you query that. So it kind of asking the community to also help with this, because it's costing a lot of work for us in the core team to actually answer SQL questions, how you query this in SQL and for CB or Prometheus. Anyway, pretty amazing growth for that project. It's also really great about Grafana is that it can be used in so many different domains and circumstances. And most of the companies that use it are also kind of really cool, and they use it for different things. And a couple of years ago, we saw that SpaceX was using it in their sort of launch control center when they landed the first Falcon 9 rocket. And that kind of, when I saw that, it kind of made my day. But it's just cool. I mean, of course, a lot of you use Grafana for application monitoring and infrastructure monitoring and metrics and application analytics. But it's also being used for sort of in agriculture, where they put sensor in the grounds and sort of look at the sort of fertility of the soil, and or you use it for sort of industrial sensors or home automation systems. And I mean, where a couple of guys use it to monitor the availability of T-shirts in the exhibit hall. Let's see. Now to the real interesting part. We'll kind of jump over the intro to Grafana, since most of you are familiar with it. All of the demos I'm going to do is in V5. So a lot of things has changed in V5 in terms of just look and feel, and we'll kind of move your sheets a little bit, so don't be mad. But hopefully all of the changes are going to be sort of for the better. As I said, Grafana is all about building dashboards composed of these sort of panels, and that hasn't changed. I mean, nothing has changed beyond just some minor UX changes. And for those of you who aren't familiar with sort of the basics of Grafana, you add these panels, you jump into edit mode, and you are taken to the metrics tab. The metrics tab looks different for each type of data source. So in this case, I'm using Graphite, and I get sort of a Graphite query editor that allows me to explore the metrics available in Graphite. And once I sort of found a metric, I can apply transformations to that through the sort of Graphite transformation functions, and and then of course tons of options for the graph panel. But I mean, this is nothing new, particularly for the V5 release. But just sort of, if it was a while since you used Grafana, or if you haven't seen Grafana before, you kind of each panel is kind of this isolated thing that you write your metric queries in, and you show data. But there are ways to sort of build more dynamic dashboards as well that use something that's called that we call template variables. That allows you to build more dynamic dashboards where you get these kind of drop downs at the top. That allows you to sort of quickly change the scope of the data for multiple panels. Anyway, back to what I really wanted to talk about was V5. And the biggest sort of thing there are a couple of big things, but the biggest thing that I worked on, that I'm sort of really excited about, is the new grid system and what it kind of enables. Because before in Grafana, it was kind of clunky to move panels around, create layouts, and all of that felt very sort of clunky. So now in Grafana v5, you have a kind of more modern layout system where panels move out of the way when you resize them, and it's a lot easier to move panels around. But the most exciting thing is that it's going to enable more layout types. So you can have sort of layouts like this wasn't possible in Grafana v4 because everything had to be laid out in rows where each, with the height of each sort of panel needed to match. So you couldn't have sort of really high vertical panels on the side. Anyway, so that's really excited. I fucked up this layout now. But I'm really excited about that aspect. Not only is it more easier to use and build dashboards, but it's going to enable more types of layouts and also new types of panels, because now we can actually have panels that stretch vertically like this. So the next thing that I want to do is build a new multi-stat panel that allows you to sort of stack a lot of metrics vertically, which is something you can do with single stat, but it's very inefficient because each single stat panel requires separate queries. So that was the new grid system. The next big thing that I want to touch on is the UX changes. So we've changed the side menu a little bit, and we also, so all of the pages have a kind of new look to them with this tab look. It's nothing super interesting here. Prometheus users might be sort of excited that we have a search in the data source view because they have usually a ton of data source instances. But otherwise, it's mostly a cosmetic change, but also easy, so you can navigate around the interface easier, and it looks a lot better. But a more maybe meaningful UX change is that the dashboard settings views has been now kind of combined into a unified view, so you don't have to sort of switch these views to a drop-down anymore. So you can now access annotations. The section that we previously called templating is now called variables, version history, where you can restore different sort of older versions of a dashboard. But so that's new grid and new UX. In terms of a new capability, the biggest thing that we've been working on for, it feels like ages, is folders and dashboard, sort of dashboard folders. Because that's been one of the top rated feature requests. Sort of new other ways to organize and large Grafana installations and group dashboards along team lines or application lines. So previously you could do that with tags, but tags, people didn't feel sort of tags was enough of a tool to sort of organize dashboards. So that's why we kind of introduced folders, which allows you to sort of expand and collapse these regions or sections. We also added starred and recent dashboards to the search. And the folders can also be managed, or dashboards in general can be managed through these new managed dashboard pages, which allows you to sort of do some quick administration of dashboards. You can do move the action, move multiple dashboards, or delete multiple dashboards. And it's also from these views that you can administrate sort of the folder permissions, which is also a completely new thing in Grafana v5, in that you can actually set permissions on folders and on dashboards. And of course, if you set the permissions on the folder, they will be inherited by the dashboards that they contain. Can sort of review that quickly. The permission system is pretty easy. You can add permissions on teams, which is also a new thing in v5. You can show that in a sec, but you can add permissions on the user, a particular user as well. And you can add permissions on the team. And if I go to a dashboard that is contained, so any dashboard has permissions as well, and then they get their permissions inherited. And you can you cannot override the folder permissions, but you can override the default sort of role-based permissions. As I said, Teams is a completely new sort of thing that we are adding in v5. Mostly now they're only sort of there for the permission system to make it easier to manage the permissions. Right now we only have permissions on folders and dashboards, but we hope to add them to data sources as well. So lastly, there's one feature that I want to sort of just mention. It's hard to demo it because it's a backend feature, but I think it's kind of sort of be appreciated and it's interesting in a way. And that's a provisioning system. Previously in Grafana, when you created new data sources or new dashboards, it had to be done through the UI or through the HTTP API, which kind of requires that Grafana is running, and it's a bit tricky to do from a sort of configuration management perspective or sort of automation perspective. People have been sort of managing to do that through the API, but it's tricky. So now Grafana has sort of a built-in provisioning system, so you can set up data sources and dashboards through configuration files, which is going to sort of make it's going to be super easy if you have Kubernetes or anything. So you just spin up Grafana and have your data sources and your dashboards already there. It's also an active sync, so if you change them on disk, it's going to be sort of you don't have to restart Grafana for that change to be picked up. So that was kind of the V5 feature highlights, and I will have a few features that I want to highlight as well that I'm not sure everyone kind of is aware of. It's because it's a feature that is hidden and also quite recently added as well. So annotations is a very old feature in Grafana that allows you to overlay rich event data. I'm just going to remove this. It's kind of what I want to show. So annotations is an old feature in Grafana that allows you to sort of overlay these events on graphs. These could be sort of deploy events, marketing, outages, anything. But before in Grafana, you had to set up sort of an annotation query that fetched these events from a data source like Elasticsearch, FOSDEM, Prometheus, Grafana, anything that kind of could contain the event data. So what you couldn't do was create these events from within the UI. And that's actually something you can do starting from V4.5, I think it was when we introduced this feature. So just by holding down Command on Mac or Control on Windows and Linux, you can open the Add Annotation view and sort of describe an event. And of course, this can also be automated and done through, so you can use the HTTP API to create these. And these are stored in Grafana's own database, so you don't have to sort of set up a data source to store these. What else you can do is actually, if you do the same thing but mark a region, is to create a region annotation and write a description. And the tags here are kind of important in that it will allow you to show this event on other dashboards and search and filter for it. So now I'll save this. If I now go back to this new grid dashboard, I can add an annotation query called outages and say I want to look at all annotations that are created in the Grafana database with the tag outage. And hopefully if I zoom out, I should see. Oh, here we go. There it is. So if I tag it, I can then sort of create these annotation queries on other dashboards and actually show them sort of on a conditional basis. So I can toggle that annotation on and off. I touched on templating briefly before. What you can do beyond just sort of using template variables to create dynamic dashboards is you can also have Grafana repeat panel. And what's new in V5 is that you can have a panel be repeated in the vertical direction, not just horizontally. So in this case, this single stat panel is being repeated for each value on the side here. And you can have, there's also a concept of rows in Grafana, which is still there in V5. It's slightly different. But then you can also have Grafana repeat whole rows for each value you select in a template variable. The last kind of tips and tricks is showing how you can use style overrides in the graph to really customize how your graphs look. In this case, I'm showing network traffic in and out, and I'm showing the out metrics on the bottom, so on the negative axis. And the way I'm doing that is using a display override, saying all series with the name out in its name should be in a separate stack group, and it should also be transformed and visualized on a negative y-axis. There's other use cases for sort of style overrides in that you can sort of really customize how each series should be sort of displayed. You can sort of say, okay, this series shouldn't be displayed with any sort of line fill, or this series should have points. So I could sort of say this should not have any lines on it. So you can really customize the look of your graph using style overrides. There's also a cool style override that's called fill below to, that allows you to fill a region between two series, which can be useful if you have a min and max and average. So you can sort of mark a region. That pretty much covers most of my demos, and wanted to leave some time for questions. I'm sure there are a few.
Okay, please stay seated and quiet, and time for questions.
Release date?
Oh yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned this. So beta on Monday. We had originally planned it for Thursday, but since we were going to go to FOSDEM and travel yesterday, we kind of pushed it to Monday. So the plan is to release it on Monday. And stable, we hope to sort of do in 3 weeks' time at the Grafana Con.
How is your company funded? What are your means of financing?
So Grafana Labs provides hosted metric services, which is our kind of main hosted services for both Grafana and metrics, and that's kind of our main revenue driver. And we also have support services and training and other sort of sources of revenue as well.
We are deploying a lot of dashboards in different environments on different servers, Grafana instances, and you changed a lot of on the dashboard design and so on. And what about the old dashboards? Is it possible to use them, or have we to redesign them? Or
very good question. So the question is sort of with this new grid system that is introduced in V5, how will sort of old dashboards work with that new system? Because the positioning is completely different. So the answer is that your old dashboards will work just fine, and they will Grafana will try to migrate them to the new positioning system. So it should look close to identical with slight differences in panel height. Because in Grafana V4 and going back, you could set panel height and row height to a sort of per pixel level. But in the new system, there's a kind of snap. So you cannot set the height of panels on a per pixel level. You have to set it a little bit more coarse grain. So there's going to be slight differences. I also recommend if you try the beta, you have to update the plugins, because panel plugins could have some issues with the grid system. We tried to sort of test with most of them, and most of them look fine, but a few might need an update. The biggest thing that to keep in mind though is that if you change, you save a dashboard in V5 and try to import it in V4, it's not going to work. But you can use the So if you downgrade, you can use the version history system to downgrade a dashboard you save.
Okay, so you are adding two new features, so provisioning of dashboards and folders, so grouping them. Are those features compatible with each other? So can you provision folders of dashboards?
Yes, you can provision folders as well. I think, yeah, the way you specify folders is that or the way you provision dashboards is to specify a specification file where the dashboards can be found on disk, and then you can specify a folder name as well for where in the UI, or like if I can create a folder for those dashboards.
Just follow-up question on the previous one. After migration to version 5, will you change the way you store dashboard in database? Will it change the same global JSON or something different?
No, well, the JSON is slightly different. It's sort of because the panel's position model has changed, and it's no longer structured in rows. It's more structured in as a sort of, here's a collection of panels and their position. So the structure of the JSON is slightly different, but it's mostly sort of, instead of laying them out in rows, they're just in a flat array now.
But still single silent database, right?
Yeah, everything is stored in Grafana's database. We have there is one big change that I didn't touch on because it's kind of and that's Grafana's the IDs for the dashboard have changed, and the URL has changed, and this is something we worked really hard on just last minute, and it's related to the provisioning system, and also before Grafana, going back, the slug is the unique ID for a dashboard, and the slug is based on the title. So if you change the name of the dashboard, you break all the links to that dashboard. So if you have all the alert emails or links in Slack, those links are not going to work anymore if you rename the dashboard. And we felt that was a really bad experience. And also kind of ties into the provisioning. So we wanted a unique ID and something in the ID, something in the URL that we can tie the dashboard to, even after you change the dashboard name. So that's kind of why the dashboard URL has changed in D5 as well.
The user management and permission management, is that going to be exposed to the provisioning system or the HTTP API?
It is exposed to the HTTP API, but it's not supposed. So you can't provision users or organizations and teams through the provisioning system yet. It's something we have talked about, but we're not sure about. But it's definitely something that we might want to add. So you can add specifically teams or users and provide some rules there. But nothing that's done right now.
Hi. How will you deal with validated providers for permissions, like Google Authentication or?
How I will provide with OAuth, or authentication providers?
So permissions. How will you deal with permissions for other identity providers than built-in users?
Yeah. Currently, we don't have any ways. We haven't written any way to integrate the permission system with outside permission systems, so LDAP, OAuth. So all these permissions are something that's kind of only living in Grafana right now. But we will probably look into some way to sync these with outside sources as well. But currently, this is something that only lives in Grafana.
Short second question about dashboards. You say if I find a dashboard in a file, then it is loaded and also stored in the database, or it's...
Yes. So and the reason for that is to provide some features. So everything in Grafana is kind of tied to the dashboard in the database. Like if you store a dashboard, if you have alerts in the dashboard, the alerts is kind of tied to the dashboard ID, database ID. So there's a bunch of features that require the dashboard, the database ID. But what's cool with the provisioning system, both for data sources and dashboard, is that you can lock down editing from the UI. So you can control that. So this data source so the master data is the file in the provisioning system. So you don't accidentally change it in the UI. So you can have some control over that. Yeah.
The region annotations, are there a way to get those from data sources, not from Grafana's database?